And welcome to Impact 2023, our continuing conversation. Yeah, I think it's that battery.
Did y'all ran the battery instead of?
Nope, we had it plugged in. All right. Welcome to Impact 2023, our continuing conversation where we talk about all topics, current events, where we talk about things that are popping up in your mind and across the country and across the world. We talk about it from a Christian standpoint, a Christian perspective. And as always, for those of you who have been here before, this is a conversation. And so we ask that you feel free to join in. You can type your questions and your comments into the comment section, and we will address them as they pop up. We always love and enjoy participation. And so if you just don't want to hear me talk and you want to be a part of the conversation and you have something insightful to say, please feel free to say it. It will come up on the screen and we will address it. As always, we don't dilly-dally around, as they could say. We hop right into the discussion. And I don't know where you are located, but today here in Virginia, I know Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, it is election day. And just a quick, brief story before we go into what we're talking about today. It was election day. I took my son with me because most of the kids are around here off of school. So it's an opportunity. I've seen a lot of parents and grandparents taking young children into the booth, the voting booth with them. And so, as always, I took my son, walked him up through the process, showing our ID, going getting our ballot, going and circling in the names of the people. It was interesting because I was able to talk about the different people on the slate. Like, I went to, I knew this person when they were a young person, and this person is the father of some of the students at your elementary school, and this person I went to church with back in the day. I was able to talk through the process with him. And he was excited, of course, and then we went ahead and we got our I voted stickers and we went on about our way. But we were in the car, and my son said, "You know what? I don't know if I'm going to vote when I get older." And then that's when I had my moment. And I spoke to him about the fact that I asked him if he knew what ancestors were, and he said yes. And then I talked to him about the fact that our ancestors fought and sacrificed so that we would have the right to vote. And I was very clear. I said, you would be disrespectful to our ancestors if you don't continue on that hard work that they fought for. And he understood. And he was like, you know what? I am going to vote. And so just as a reminder to everyone, there is a reason why we vote. Whether you are African-American like me and your ancestors fought and died to vote, whether you are a woman and you had people that came before you who fought hard to vote, or you were just any person, period. White, black, brown, whatever. All of us at some point in some time, unless you just came from a family of royalty, had to fight for our opportunities to vote. And so I think it's important that we continue on that process. Everybody needs to let your voice be heard. Doesn't matter what side, left, right, up, down, whatever. We all need to vote. And I know we've talked about that many times on this show. But you do have a responsibility to those who came before you, those who are coming after you, and those who are with you right now to make sure that your voice is heard. And that's another reason why we're here at Impact 2023, to make sure our voices are heard. So we're going to talk about a topic today that we've kind of talked about a little bit before, but it's a little bit different. And we're going back to talking about the different crises across the world. And what has happened recently is that there has been an uproar of protests and people talking on one side or the other. Of course, that we don't call it this as much anymore, but it's still canceling culture trying to go on. And so if you haven't really been aware, at many of the universities, government places as well, there have been protests. There have been protests for and against what Israel is doing. There have been less protests, but there have been against Russia and Ukraine. And so when you look across the world, you kind of see these protests. Now, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's really been some significant movement. Just recently, one of the leaders in the House, the United States House of Representatives, was having a press conference and was basically shouted down and had to cancel the rest of the conference because people were protesting. Not so much against them, but just protesting against the war and against what's happening with the war. And so that makes you think, what is the most productive way to have conversations? And it's been a hard situation. It's gone again. Okay, so here. All right. Well, if you can still hear me, it's been a challenging time and a hard conversation where people are going back and forth about how they feel, and they've been injecting a lot of passion into it. And so what has happened is at the collegiate level, there's been numerous college administrators who have been getting themselves in hot water because of comments that they're making either for Israel or pro-Palestinian, anti-Palestinian or anti-Israel. The way that they're making their comments, even just what you're liking on your social media platforms, you're saying, I like this or I don't like that. It's attributing to people getting into a lot of trouble. And it's because there's a lot of passion going on. And as the people who think through the process, and that's what I'll call everybody who welcomes us here, how do we communicate one way or another with or for or against our position? Example, here in the United States, we have a lot of hot button issues that they say you just shouldn't talk about. At a dinner party, you don't talk about these at work. That's abortion. That's LGBTQ rights. That's gun control. And then politics as a whole. And then there's some others. But you don't talk about those things. And the reason you don't talk about those things is that people get so passionate. If you're pro women's rights and you're talking to somebody who's pro or anti-abortion, sometimes it's a hard conversation. The women's rights person to sit back and say, well, there are numerous reasons why a woman has to have abortions. It's not necessarily just somebody trying to terminate a pregnancy. Sometimes it's life. And you'll hear the anti-abortion person be like, but you're killing babies, It's a fuss. There's no conversation going on there. It's just one person being passionate and yelling, and the other person just same thing with gun rights. You got people like, I love my guns, and you can't really have a good conversation necessarily with them if they're going to be, I love my guns, and that's all they're saying. And so we have those hot button issues here all the time. The hot button issue of Israel and Palestine is just the same way. But I think it's a conversation that we need to have, because people are saying, well, what, it's been a common phrase that we've been talked about here and on the different offerings that we have. What side are you on, or who's right, who's wrong? Or you have some, younger people maybe who don't even understand the conflict and want to know information about it. How do you discuss these things in a manner of not, in a manner that's not going to be in a way that's going to be detrimental? And so what's happening with the college campuses and even some of these celebrities and just people who are just like, they want to be aggressive in whatever tone that they take and whatever they're talking about with the issue. Can't do it like that. So what we've discussed, the first thing is you got to come to it with some humanity. There is no right in this situation. When people are dying, innocent people are dying. Now, so whether you are pro-Israel, whether you're pro-Palestine, whether you're pro both, whether you aren't pro any, we got to step to these scenarios and these situations with just a human compassion, understanding that You know, no matter who's right or who's wrong, innocent people shouldn't be dying. Civilians shouldn't be dying. People who are not engaged in the war machine or political leaders who are out here sending people to die, people shouldn't be dying. These innocent civilians. And so you have to have compassion, I think, or you need to step in with compassion for that. And so there's no way, if you're saying stepping in with compassion, there's no way you can sit back and say, well, you know, these folk got what they're getting, or they got what they deserve. And so when the Palestinians came and killed 1,300 people, you can't sit back and say, well, Israel gets that. That's what they deserve for all the stuff that they did. Or if you're sitting back and you're looking at the Palestinians right now and they're being bombed and innocent people are being killed as a result of the bombs or the invasion, you can't sit back and be like, well, that's what they get because Hamas shouldn't have went across there and did that. None of the people who were killed, who are civilians, had any kind of sway over what these other military and political leaders and government officials did. And so there's nobody who can sit back and say, well, that's what they get. That's what they deserve. And so that type of rhetoric and that type of conversation just has to be eliminated in the beginning. You can't have that conversation and get anywhere when you're talking about what innocent people deserve and innocent people get. And I think that's the way that we need to look at it as, again, as people who are thinking through the process. If anybody the people who deserve or earned some of these violent interactions are the people who it'll never touch. And that's the military leaders, not the politicians, those people who are sitting in the, as they say, the ivory tower. Those people, they're not going to be touched by any of this. They just send people out. And so you can't have the discussion like that when you're just talking about what one group deserves or another group deserves. And honestly, one of the cries out here is they're saying to the politicians, well, you got blood on your hands here in the United States. You got blood on your hands for supporting this group, or you got blood on your hands for supporting that group. I don't think that one hits off either. Just in the respect of, you may support people, but you're not necessarily putting them in a position to do the things that they're doing. Just because you support a group or just because you are allies or friends of a group doesn't mean that you are telling them to go ahead and do damage, go ahead and do destructive activities. And that's on both sides. So the Arabic Muslim countries who may support Hamas, countries like the United States and others who may support Israel, we do have some culpability in the fact that we do assist with these countries. But at the end of the day, sitting there yelling at a politician in one of the countries and saying, well, you got blood on your hands, I think that's a little bit extreme. So I think when we have these conversations, we have to talk with just a little bit more compassion and realization that at the end of the day, people are dying. And people are dying in some horrific manners. And I know people are like, well, a dead person over here, there's a dead person over here. I don't think, and we know this as a fact, that all deaths aren't the same. They all result in the same activity, but the journey to get there is not the same. If you were really upset at somebody, you're not going to be like, well, I hope you die. If you're really upset at somebody, you're going to be like, I hope that you have a slow and painful death. And neither one of them is a good thing to say. Neither one of them is the proper thing to say. But there's a difference in what you're saying. One is you got some hate and some vitriol there, slow and painful death. Whereas the other one, I hope they die. You you got some dislike, but it ain't, And so the point of that is that when you're looking at these people, and you're looking at how they're dying and how they're being killed, there's some differences there of where we need to look at and have even more compassion. If you're dying on the battlefield because that's what you chose to do, that's one thing. If you're at a concert and then people come around and torture you and kill you, that's another thing. If you're sitting in your bed as a kid and bombs are coming down and blowing things up and killing you, that's another thing. These are not the same. And so the way that you look at stuff and the way that you compare people, like, well, they're dying over here and it's not equal. And we shouldn't act like it's equal. We should have compassion for each individual situation and understand how bad things are. I think this is important because we need to have the conversation about what's going on in other areas of the world. But we need to have conversations that are full of compassion, especially if we're going to call ourselves Christians, especially if we're going to act in moral manners or or take steps in the way of being a Christian. I think we have to be very careful with how we're looking at situations and be able to separate the governments, the politics, the leaders from the people who are actually being affected. We have to be very clear from the people who are actually being affected. And so when we talk about the governments, we talk about what Israel has done, we talk about what Palestinians have done. Let's be clear to understand the difference between what the people, the individual people are doing and those who are the leaders. Statistics. They said 70% of the population in Gaza has been displaced. 70% of the people in Gaza are no longer in their homes. And so there's no way you can sit back and be like, well, those people got, those people got in bed with the government. That's what they get, blah, 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 blah. 70% of the population is displaced. Not in their homes. Had to go somewhere else. Refugee camps. Just displaced and homeless. Had to go stay, in another part of the country that they're not from or that's not their home and be stayed up with another person, family member or whatever. 70%. And so regardless of how you feel, there has to be some compassion there or should be some compassion there. You look at the Israelis and they say that there's certain areas of the population where they had to leave the cities because they weren't safe because of the amount of bombs that are coming in. Even though they have their missile defense system, they don't catch all of them, and you just can't live and function in these individual areas. And so they're displaced as well. Now, it's not 70% of the population, but there needs to be compassion on both sides of that situation. So it doesn't matter how you feel about who's right and who's wrong. Feel free to talk about it. Feel free to communicate about it. But I think we need to understand, and that's why people are getting in trouble, and that's why people get in trouble with their words, is that you have to have some compassion about everyone involved in the situation, regardless of how you feel, right or wrong, that's been done by their governments. And so that's been what's been getting people in trouble. And so you're sitting here and you're calling people monsters, you're calling people this, and you're saying that this is despicable and that's despicable. And that's where we get ourselves caught out there. And the compassion, I think, also needs to be, there's frustration that's felt where we're going to put ourselves and we're going to talk about the leaders and we're going to say, well, they need to be doing this and they need to be doing that. Let's remember, this is a region in the world that's had conflict on and off for thousands of years. And so if there were simple solutions, if there was a simple solution, it would have already been done. There are no simple solutions. When you have a complex problem, you have a complex solution. There's no simple solutions to complex problems. And if you want to know whether or not you are smart or not, when a person walks in the room and be like, hey, this is a complex problem, I got this simple answer. That is not intelligence, because you're not going to have a complex problem and then you're going to have a simple solution. Those two things, they don't work. Complex problems usually going to have a complex or complex in the layers of it solution. And so when we're giving these politicians who are just some of them are terrible, let's be honest, but some of them are genuinely trying to do their best and trying to do a good job. We have to give them compassion because these are complex problems that at the end of the day, you're not going to solve 1,000 years of conflict in an area. Not that this particular conflict is not 1,000-year conflict, but you have an area that's been in constant conflict for thousands of years. You're not going to walk in here and be like, well, look, I got it. This is what we're going to do. It doesn't make any sense. There's no logic in there. And if you expect that of somebody, then you're not making any sense. And if you think that you're somebody who can solve it like that, then you're not making any sense. There just has to be compassion where I can do the best that I can do. I can work to try to do the best that I can do, but there's no solving this today. There is just inching closer to solutions. And so basically, I've talked through the process. What was this whole thing about is let's be more careful with our words. Let's be more delicate with our words in this conversation. Let's continue to have the conversation. We can talk about right and we can talk about wrong, but we need to always approach it with some compassion. Because at the end of the day, these are innocent. The innocent people is what we should all be concerned about. And then the politics, the government, the structures and everything that's going on around these things. We can talk about that as well, but just after we've had compassion for those who are being negatively affected. And again, that's whether it is in Palestine, Israel, Gaza, or if that's in Ukraine, Russia. And if you look at the parallel there, it's always about just old men who want power and who want what somebody else has, greed and destruction. But let's just be careful with how we're and not be flipped with how we're talking about people and just calling some folk monsters and others not. As we often say here, we got to love our neighbors as ourselves. And the reality of the matter is our neighbors are Palestinians and our neighbors are Israelis. Our neighbors are Muslims. Our neighbors are Jews. Our neighbors are everybody. And so whether you think they're right or wrong, we have to love both of them the exact same in the fact that they're both of our neighbors. All right. Well, hopefully we had a couple of little technology interruptions. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. I thank everybody for joining us. Again, continue to have conversations about these topics because we still will. But again, let's just all try to be careful with our, not even careful, just thoughtful with our words. I want you to say everything you want to say. Just think before you say it. And I will do the same as well. Oh, all right. Thursday, 7 o'clock, same place, YouTube, Facebook, Thursday, 10 o'clock on Sundays. We have our worship service, same place, YouTube and Facebook. Also, we are here in person if you are in the area. And we appreciate you coming by. And then, as always, we have Impact 2023. We have a comment, and we're going to grab that first. The events and issues of today are a result of how people want what they want at any cost and how they value other people. A great question to ask is, how have we gotten to this point in life? People take what they want by any means necessary, and they just justify their actions by demonizing and devaluing others. And as much as I will agree and say, how have we gotten to this point? We've always been at this point. People always want to justify their actions. I jokingly, and I don't know if I said this on here, I was watching a show, and it was about the Vikings. And one of the things that the Vikings would say is that, we've done these terrible things where we've taken over a village, we've killed all the people, and we've stolen all their goods. And because we were successful, the gods must have smiled on us and validated what we're doing. And I think sometimes people get caught into that. They think that the validation of I'm right because I was successful. If I go and steal at this bank, I'm right because I didn't get caught. So God must think that I'm right. If I murdered this person, I'm right. I was justified because I didn't go to jail, or I'm justified because I was able to murder them and they weren't able to murder me. That is a thought process that's been going on since the beginning of time. And it's just the evilness of man or the evilness of the flesh. Sometimes I think that we always want to validate what we've done, and we'll look for any excuse and any reason to do that. And so this I think this comment is right on there. People want what they want at any cost, and it's you're either going to convince yourself on the front end, or you're going to convince yourself on the back end. And I think that that's our job as Christians, and I think that's our job as people who sit back and really kind of look at, what's right and what's wrong. Is let's not validate what we're doing. Let's not validate what we want. Let's make sure that what we want is valid. Let's not sit back here and just say, well, I want to be rich and famous, and so anything that I have to do, I'm going to do. Let's sit back and say, well, what is the right thing to do? And so I think that is a problem. People take what they want by any means. And if they are successful, they think that that's validation. And that's just not, it's narcissism, that's selfishness, that's any other things that you want to call it. That's just not the way that we're supposed to operate. And I think that's the problem. And I think it starts early. We got to teach our kids that, teach the young people that, because I think that's where the problem comes in. Where now we're telling people, you can do whatever you want to do. You can be whatever you want to be. And there's going to be for some people, this is a bit of a stretch, but for me, I think it's a correlation. When you sit there and you can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. And here's the kicker. I'm not even talking about what you think I'm talking about, LGBTQ. I'm talking about when you can walk into a place and call yourself a certain type of leader just because that's what you want to call yourself. You want to call yourself a doctor just because that's what you want to call yourself. Or you want to call yourself a cardinal or a bishop because that's just what you want to call yourself. When you can make up the rules for yourself, and that's the example that you're kind of showing people sometimes, I think that's what we're showing our kids. Or when we're telling our kids, again, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. No, you can do what you want to do. That's the right thing to do, not you can do whatever you want to do, because that then goes into any means necessary. Same thing as when you can call yourself, that new term we got, transracial out here. People who are black and they say, well, I'm white. Or people who are white and say, well, I feel like I'm black. And you can do all that. I think that gets problematic, because that gets you into a zone of where you think that anything that you want to do is okay and you're valid with anything, versus what's right and what's wrong. It's a bit of a stretch. I get it, but I do think that's connected. That's me. That's just me here. And I think that there's a connection there. I think that's just selfish way of thinking. When, whatever you want to be, you're going to selfishly try to be that. There are some rules in life. So, all right, went off on a little tangent there, but yes, thank you for that comment. I think that was actually great. I think that was absolutely great and right on it. A lot of this comes back to selfishness, selfish desires. And that's what the whole conflict is about. That's even how we discuss the conflict. It's selfish desire. All right. Well, we're at our time. Again, thank you for joining us. Please join us again. And again, as always, continue conversation. Please continue conversation. Make sure that you're speaking to your peers. Make sure that you're speaking to your children. Make sure that you're speaking to the folk in the neighborhood, because one of the things that we always need to do is solve problems. And the way that we solve those things is by communicating and moving closer to some consensus. All right, everybody have a good one and have a good night.